What's good, everybody? Welcome into the Daily Betslip for Thursday, August 18th. He's Peter Dewey. I'm Ben Heisler. Good to have all of you guys with us on a busy Thursday, both in Major League Baseball, in the WNBA. We'll have all of our best bets in both of those sports coming up in about 5 minutes or so. Peter and I are going to take a look at the NFL futures market specifically for comeback player of the year. I think of all the different futures, Peter, this one might be one of my favorites because there's so many different guys at all different tiers that are up for debate. And you and I both have a player and a bet that we like and we're going in with, but also a guy maybe way further down on the list that you and I both feel have very legitimate odds and very good odds to possibly make a run at this thing.
Yeah, I think the fun thing about this award too is it's not like a quarterback only award. Like it feels like the MVP has really become just the best quarterback award in the NFL. So this one, I mean, you could find anybody. It could be a defensive player. It could be an offensive player. So to me, I think it adds a lot of intrigue, and you can kind of pick and choose your spots. And there's some pretty favorable odds for certain guys out there too. So that should be a fun one to discuss today.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to breaking that down with you coming up in about 15, 20 minutes or so. We'll have, of course, the game of the night, which all of you guys that are watching either on Twitter or on YouTube can go ahead and vote on. The voting page is right here on our YouTube page, so make sure you guys head on over and check it out. You can also ask us questions over the course of the show, but it is the New York Mets and Atlanta Braves dynamic pitching matchup between Jacob deGrom and Max Fried. We'll have our best bets for the game as we break down the game of the night a little bit later on in the show. Before we get started with the bad beat of the day, Peter, I just got word within the last 30 to 45 minutes, some very exciting news where I currently live in the state of Kansas. Governor Laura Kelly has said that sports betting will open on September the 8th, which means it will be here right in time for the start of football season, a little bit after college football. So I'll get the last of my other accounts accounted for by that point. Maybe I'll just go ahead and save once the start of the season starts. But big day in the state of Kansas, getting all the sports books coming our way.
Love to see that. That's some good stuff right there, especially in time for the NFL season. That's beautiful.
Yeah, you really can't ask for anything more than that, knowing that there was such a demand. And a nice win, couple solid wins over the last 3 weeks for the fine state of Kansas, which I have now called home for the past several years. But let's dive into the bad beat of the night, because I think you can make an argument, Peter, that this might be the bad beat of the year in Major League Baseball. There have been plenty of other contenders, but I got to tell you, on a night where there were so many bad beats, you had in the WNBA somehow the Las Vegas Aces covering a 15.5 point spread after only scoring 51 points with about 7.5 minutes left to go against the worst team in the playoffs. They somehow cover. You have a couple games in Major League Baseball. You had your New York Yankees walk off the Tampa Bay Rays with a grand slam after being down 3 runs. And somehow that's not the bad beat of the night if you had Tampa Bay. No, the bad beat of the night last night was anybody, which included yours truly, on the Detroit Tigers as almost a 2-1 money line dog on the road against Cleveland. They had a 3-run lead. And in that 8th inning, the Guardians struck out 3 times to start the 8th inning. Should have been a great start for Detroit. 3 more outs to go to be able to cover a pretty sizable line. Turns out there was a drop third strike, and Cleveland found a way to score 6 runs after the third batter reached. I can't figure out in the life of me how this could have happened. ESPN Stats and Info said it's the first time in the expansion era, going back to 1961, that a team scored 6 runs in an inning after its first 3 batters all struck out. Peter, there's a part of me that was grateful that even though I had Detroit as a small bet last night, that I didn't watch this in person. I just had to find out about it the next day. I just figured they gave up the lead. I can't imagine watching that game as a Detroit Tigers bettor and seeing that all unfold in that type of fashion that way.
That is maddening, and you're not over exaggerating when you say it might be bad beat of the year, because like it should have just been out of the inning, and to have that a drop third strike guy gets on base to spiral into not 1 run but 6 runs is just absolutely bonkers. Like that is some crazy stuff.
Yeah, and listen, I'm a buyer in Cleveland. Both myself, Joe Summers, back in the midway portion of the year, we got on board with them. I think Joe actually has them at 10-1 to win the division. I didn't get him as good of odds, but I have them at plus 450. They're at the top of it right now. Put a little bit of a futures on them in the World Series market, as well as the winning the American League. Like, they have a decent amount of talent and some very good pitching. And so long term, I'd love to see Cleveland do well. But in that moment, I like Detroit. They're finally starting to play a little bit more confident, and then just completely let it go. And they'll probably end up on some 7, 8, 9 game losing streak the rest of the way. But if you had Detroit last night like I did, just my thoughts are with you, because that was just an absolute gut punch. And then they did it 6 times over. So with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at our best bets of the night. There's been several games already in Major League Baseball, so the slate's somewhat limited for the rest of the evening. Still have about 5-6 games or so to be able to choose from. We also have both WNBA games on the board as well. Peter and I both have a play on the late game between the Seattle Storm and Washington Mystics. But go ahead, Peter. You and I both have a play on this intriguing Toronto Blue Jays New York Yankees matchup. I know you went on record and said the New York Yankees are back. So tell me why they're back.
Oh, they're big time back. No, I'm hoping that the Josh Donaldson home run kind of exercised some demons for the Yankees yesterday, because their offense was dormant. They had scored 3 or fewer runs in 7 straight games. They finally got something going yesterday. Still didn't play good baseball. They had some bad at bats. Gleyber Torres specifically grounding into a double play with the bases loaded after Aaron Judge walked on 4 pitches, and he did it on the first pitch. So not what you want to see. But the Yankees did end up winning. I'm declaring they're back. I'm taking them on the money line tonight against the Jays, minus 150. And this is more just a fade of Jose Barrios. Barrios has not been great this year. He has over 5 ERA. He's given up 26 home runs, and he's given up a home run in 9 straight starts. Whenever you're playing at Yankee Stadium, you have a pitcher who's prone to giving up home runs. We saw last night that the Yankees hit 3 short porch home runs to right field to beat the Rays. Wouldn't be surprised if something like that happens again tonight. And on the Yankees side of things, I honestly don't mind Frankie Montas in this spot. I know he struggled in his first start as a Yankee, but he pitched very well against Boston. Really got his splitter going, got out of a couple jams. And I think in this matchup, I think I wouldn't mind a play on the over either for these teams, just because I think Barrios is going to give up a few long balls. But for the Yankees here, I think this is kind of, you build on the momentum of last night's win, and I don't think Montas has to pitch lights out for them to win this game. So I like New York minus 150. You're laying a little bit of juice, but let's not act like Toronto's been playing good baseball either. They're 3-7 over their last 10 games too. So I'll fade Barrios here. He's been a pitcher that's been maddening to back this season.
I'm trying to figure out where Barrios has just gone so wrong this year, because when he got traded, when he went away from Minnesota, this was somebody that was in his mid-20s, really good movement, like multiple pitches that he could throw for strikes and get swings and misses. And I'm not really sure what's happened, because so many pitchers as of late, came to Toronto and really were able to revitalize who they were as a pitcher. Barrios has been the complete opposite. And it's part of the reason why we're kind of on similar wavelengths with regards to this pick. My pick is not necessarily on the Yankees money line, but it is on the team total for the Yankees over 4.5 at minus 105. I was a little bit late to the party here. I think at some books they had it at 4. It started to move up throughout the course of the day, but 3 home runs yesterday, all in relatively clutch situations. You obviously can't rely on the long ball consistently, but with Barrios you can. His home runs per 9 inning, Peter, is just under 2 for the season. Part of the reason that I picked Anthony Rizzo at plus 350 for my daily dinger pick today to hit a home run is because that number climbs up to like 2.6 per 9 innings against left-handed hitters, and Rizzo's already hit a couple dingers off of him this year already. 4 home runs over, I think, his last 3 games. Like, he just gives them up constantly, and he's been worse on the road, and he hasn't been good in Yankee Stadium either, where it's much more likely to see a ball leave the yard. I think the Yankees getting some confidence back with their offense is critical. Knowing that Barrios is going to be giving up a couple home runs in this game feels like it sets up well to be able to take a team total of 4.5, knowing that New York is going to score and they're going to guarantee themselves runs. It's less about dinking and dunking their way through a pitcher. It's because those balls are likely going to leave the ballpark. And the Blue Jays bullpen at the same time has also been terrible. So even if they only get 3 runs against Barrios, gives them another opportunity to get a couple more against the bad Blue Jays bullpen.
Yeah, I don't mind that play at all. I think if the Yankees win this game, and I see Caleb drop in the chat, he said even with Montas, I feel the runs from the Yankees will help them win. I agree with that completely. I don't think this is a game where you're kind of backing Frankie Montas to outduel Jose Barrios. I think this is the type of game where you're backing the Yankees to just hop on Barrios and score a bunch of runs and just hope that they can hold up. And he likes your Rizzo pick too. So there we go, Ben. I like that.
Yeah, I'll take it. I appreciate the love on Rizzo. I hope that he's able to come through for you. You've watched this team a little bit more than I have consistently as a fan. Why do you think these first couple starts for Montas haven't gone according to plan? I know that first one for him, he really got roughed up pretty badly.
Yeah, his ERA away from Oakland this year is bad, which is obviously concerning. It was when the Yankees traded for him, all that started kind of come out where in Yankees circles, and it was like, maybe we should have given up the farm for Luis Castillo because this guy does not pitch well away from the Coliseum. But I will say I watched the start against the Red Sox, and he didn't pitch fantastic, but he was able to work out of jams. He had the strikeout pitch, his splitter going. So to me, that's a good sign. Obviously, first couple times you're going to pitch in a Yankee uniform, especially in Yankee Stadium, there's the nerves. It's a completely different atmosphere to be in as a player, as Joey Gallo could tell you. So right. I think he's going to be okay tonight. Again, I don't think he's going to be lights out, but I think if he just can give them like 5-6 innings, 3 runs, they should be fine.
Yeah. That should be part of it. And again, I've seen some movement as well on the under for tonight's game. And that was also part of the reason why instead of taking the over, because I feel like the Yankees are going to be able to put some points on the board, put some runs on the board, might as well just go with their team total instead, because you feel a little bit more consistent about them compared to Toronto. The fact that they've hit those home runs as opposed to Toronto getting some runs on the board against Baltimore, and then now having to travel back to Yankee Stadium. So those are my MLB plays. I know that you have another one on the board, so we'll get to yours, and then we'll talk a little bit of WNBA here on the Thursday night. So we're going from a play on the Yankees on the money line to a prop in the late game tonight. Tell me a little bit more about it.
Yeah, I'm taking Yu Darvish over 6.5 strikeouts against the Nationals. His last start actually came against the Nationals. He had 7 strikeouts, was largely ineffective in that game, though. Gave up 4 runs, gave up 7 hits. Not one of his better starts. They actually lost that game. But the thing with Darvish, I'm surprised this is at plus money, Ben, and this is why I jumped on it. I'm hoping I don't get burned by that. But he's cleared 6.5 strikeouts in 7 of his last 9 starts. So Darvish, the strikeout pitch has been there for him. The Nats have been decent in terms of striking out this year, but this is also a completely different team than what we saw at the beginning of the year. They don't have Juan Soto anymore. They don't have Josh Bell. So I'm not sold on this Nationals lineup. They've lost 2 straight. They still haven't even cracked 40 wins on the season. Darvish has just been really good at striking guys out. So if I'm going to back any kind of trend here, it's going to be him and how well he's been pitching. So I like him here in this spot. I think he could probably get through 6-7 innings because, like I said, this is a weaker lineup. So give me Darvish over 6.5.
I like the play quite a bit. Darvish's strikeout numbers consistently great, really all season long. Just over 9 per 9 innings. Been really, really good too at home. In 66 innings at home this year, ERA of 2.17. On the road, it's been a little bit worse at 4.5. And this is still a Washington team, like you said, one of the worst teams, if not the worst team in baseball. They're going from the East Coast all the way out to San Diego, following their series against the Chicago Cubs. So you get a tired, bad team against a guy that's got terrific stuff in Darvish. I think this sets up very, very well for him, unless he's one of those days where he's pitching to contact and just saying, all right, I'm going to save some of these bullets in this right arm and make sure that I can just go through and breeze them because I can beat them in a wide variety of ways. But they're not going to be able to catch up with it. So I think that's a very good way to go. All right, let's talk a little bit of WNBA because there are 2 more playoff games after a pretty fascinating slate. On Wednesday, you had the New York Liberty with a big upset over the Chicago Sky in Chicago. Remember, the new format for the WNBA playoffs has changed this year. It used to be the top 2 teams would get a bye until the semifinals, and it was a single elimination in this first round. But now all of these series are a best of 3 semifinals, and then eventually the finals become a best of 5 series. But now Chicago in a situation where They need 2 more wins to beat New York. Meanwhile, you had a Phoenix Mercury team down their 2 best players in Skylar Diggins-Smith, as well as Diana Taurasi. They were hanging with the best team in the WNBA this year, the Las Vegas Aces, up until late, and then somehow the Aces ended up covering that 15.5-point spread. But 2 really intriguing games, Peter, on the books tonight. I'm going to start with the first one and a play before we get to our plays for the late game. So I'm looking at the Dallas Wings and the Connecticut Sun, and I'm going to focus on the first half total of over 81.5. It's really unfortunate for Dallas because they've played Connecticut really well. They actually have a 2-1 record against the Sun this year, both straight up and against the spread. The Sun have dominated against bad teams, but the 3 teams that they really struggled against this year were some of the better teams in Chicago and Las Vegas, and for whatever reason, Dallas. The problem for Dallas is that they will not have Arike Ogunbowale. She's out with a core muscle injury. She's going to miss the first round of the postseason. But these are 2 teams offensively in the first half that have been dynamite throughout the course of the second half of the season. Connecticut's had a really good second half. They're also a team that has started to push the pace a little bit. But then in the second half, their defensive rating goes even higher. They finished the season one of the best defensive rated teams in the league, but especially in the second half, they've done a really good job of locking down. And I think especially with Dallas not having Ogunbowale as your closer available, that's going to impact them defensively. But in the first half, this is a team that has really pushed pace, that has found other alternatives to score the basketball. And I like them to be able to keep pace with Connecticut early on. I see this being a little bit more up-tempo in the first half before Connecticut finally settles down. They're a 9.5-point favorite in this game, Peter, but 81.5 feels like a reasonable number given the way both of these 2 teams can operate on offense. So I like the over 81.5 in the first half in the first game of the WNBA playoffs tonight.
Yeah, I don't mind that play at all. I really like Connecticut's offense. I am a little worried about Dallas without Ogunbowale, just like where are they going to find consistent scoring? But at the same time, you're not asking for a ton of points. Like 81.5, like 42-40 at the half is a very reasonable type of score. Like that's the way I always break down those kind of totals in my head. So I don't mind it at all right there. I think Jonquel Jones has been really good since coming back from that injury. So I think that's the kind of, if you're the Sun, if she gets out to a fast start, this could be a real high scoring game.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if I end up making a play on the Sun live in this game in the second half because of their ability to close out. Because I could see Dallas running out of gas. Remember, I think their numbers a little bit might be a tad bit skewed. They put up 116 points against Los Angeles in their final game. That might have pushed some of those metrics up a little bit. But they still put up 86 against a good Liberty team, put up 95 against Indiana. That's the worst team in the league. And then kind of fell back a little bit once they clinched that 6th spot against New York and on the road at Phoenix. But Dallas, I think early on might surprise Connecticut a little bit, catch them napping. So I like the over as far as both teams being able to push pace. Then you have the second game of the night. And I think this is the series that everyone is really, really intrigued by, at least going into the postseason. Now it's, Chicago and New York because of the upset from the Liberty. But you have the Seattle Storm as the 4 seed, the Washington Mystics as the 5 seed. You and I both have plays on this game. So I'll go to you first, and then I'll come back for my pick on this game. We're talking about the Storm team that's a 3.5-point favorite and probably the 2 most evenly matched teams as the 4 and the 5 seeds match up over the course of the playoffs tonight.
Yeah, I actually bet on this early, and I'm a little disappointed I did because the line has moved. I have the Storm at -4 in this one. I think they're going to win and win fairly easily. I don't want to take anything away from this Mystics team, but we look at the season-long metrics for these teams, top 2 teams in the WNBA in terms of defensive rating. But if you go over the last 10 games, Seattle's offense has really turned on. They were like middle of the pack for the entire season, but over the last 10 games, they're 3rd in offensive rating. Over the last 5, they're 2nd. And I think a big reason for that is you have Tina Charles now like fully integrated into this roster after they signed her midseason. And between her, Brianna Stewart, Sue Bird, like 3 great UConn players. But you have 3 extremely talented scorers, 3 extremely talented players. I think Washington's defense is great, but on the offensive side of things, I just don't know if they have, after Elena Deladon, as many options that they can throw at you as Seattle does. I think Seattle just offensively is a superior team here. So if this ends up being a close game, I think the Storm can still pull it out. 4 points. I would love it at the 3.5 just because any half a point is a win here. But I just genuinely think the offensive game for Seattle, their offensive rating is like over the last 5 games, it's like 116. Like they've been on fire the last 5 games. So if they play like that, I don't care how good the Mystics defense is. And if this game turns into a rock fight defensively, Seattle is more than equipped to handle a defensive type of game. So I give them the edge in this one. I just don't think the Mystics offensively have as much firepower.
I think you're on the right side here, and this number is actually moved from 3.5 up to 4. So I think a lot of the sharps are with you as well. And it's maybe we're walking down narrative street a little bit in Sue Bird's final year. You still have the MVP of the league in Breanna Stewart. In my opinion, I think if you look at some of her advanced numbers, she's clear and away ahead of Asia Wilson. Wilson could still end up getting it, but she's had just an absolutely remarkable year. I'm going to focus my bet for this game on actually just the first 10 minutes and take the Storm -1 in the first quarter against Washington. You mentioned how good Seattle has been offensively over the last 5 games of the season. Consider this, like, they have an offensive rating of nearly 9 points better than the second best team over that run. Like, for whatever reason, over the course of the last, 5-6 games, they've taken their offense to an entirely different level. And then when it comes to their ability on defense, they still finished the season top 3. But here's the numbers. So Seattle, since August, by far and away the best offensive rating in the first quarter of any WNBA team. That number is way higher than even their top offensive numbers over the course of the first half and of the entire game. It's 135.2. And Washington, for as good as they are defensively, their defensive ranking in the first quarter over the last 2 weeks has been actually below average. They rank 7th in the WNBA in first quarter defensive rating. This just have to cover 1 point at home.
Yeah.
Like, this is just set up so well for Seattle to just go ahead, take an early lead, push the pace and dictate it the way that they want, that, even if Washington makes a little bit of a run, all you need is just a couple points, and Seattle at home should be able to cover this number because it's something they've done not only just over the last few weeks, but throughout the course of the entire season, playing really well in the first quarter. So rather than worry about whether or not they have to cover the 4 or 3.5, I'm just going to focus on the first quarter, sit back, relax, and then enjoy the game afterwards.
I like that. You get it over with quickly. Whether you win or lose, you're going to know 10 minutes into the game. So that's always a positive too. I like that play. I think backing the Storm's offense just in this series and possibly just going forward, they look like a completely different team. Having the time to integrate a player like Tina Charles into the fold has got to be part of it too, because she's a fantastic player. So you add her in, and then it's like, okay, we have 3 proven go-to options. I just think that's invaluable in playoff basketball at any level.
No doubt. And one other quick note on this game before we go back and share our best bets of the night. Everybody's talking about how Washington is an entirely different team with Elena Delle Donne on the court. And that's true. The thing is, the Storm still went 2-1 against Washington, and Delle Donne played in all 3 of those games. So I think their record was 18-7 when Delle Donne was on the floor for them, and 4-7 when she wasn't. I mean, they lost 2 games to Seattle when she was on the floor. So, I have Seattle moving on. And I even made a video here at BetSided saying that if there's a dark horse team that I like to beat the Aces in the second round, I think Seattle is equipped to do it because of what we've been talking about. They're dynamic offensively right now. They can run with the Aces if they want to. And they've also shown more of an ability on defense than Las Vegas has throughout the course of the year. So fun game tonight. Definitely recommend that you guys check it out. Maybe flip back and forth between the New York Mets and Atlanta Braves. And then on the late game, go ahead and switch it up to the WNBA game on action tonight, especially if you got some bets in. So let's take a look at our plays for the night. Reminder that we have our NFL futures discussion for comeback player of the year coming up in just a minute. So make sure you guys stick around for that. So Peter is going with the Yankees on the money line, -150 against the Toronto Blue Jays. Yankees, he says they're back, so they have an opportunity to go ahead and prove their worth tonight at home with Frankie Montas on the mound against Jose Barrios. Going with the over 6.5 on Yu Darvish strikeouts. as well as the Seattle Storm -4 against the Washington Mystics. As for me, I'm also on the Yankees, but I like their team total at over 4.5 runs against Barrios. And then 2 WNBA plays for your boy. First half over 81.5 between Dallas and the Connecticut Sun, and also taking the Seattle Storm, but focusing on their first quarter number, only have to cover at -1 in the late game between them and the Washington Mystics. All right, Pete, let's talk a little bit of football here. It's always an opportunity for us. Just mentioned that here in my state of Kansas, I'm going to have legal sports betting in my state right before the start of football season. So I'm trying to figure out where I want to be able to go with all these different U.S. regulated sports books. And I know that there are a handful of them that are already placed futures and odds for comeback player of the year. Now, this is a fun one because, as you mentioned at the beginning of the show, most of these offensive awards, you always feel like they're going to go to a quarterback, whether it's MVP, whether it's rookie of the year. Like, it's almost impossible these days not to find a quarterback award. But, comeback player of the year is a kind of more of a diverse option where you have all sorts of players. And sometimes it can be a little bit from storyline. Maybe you can make the argument that Alex Smith, the year that he won it, wasn't necessarily the most deserving stat-wise, but because of his story to be able to come back from what people thought might, he never would walk again, or at least walk effectively, let alone play football. This award can be something that I think if you know the players and you know how the rest of the league tends to vote for something like this, you might be able to find some solid value within the market. So you and I each have 2 picks, our actual pick to win it, as well as a dark horse play that's several odds further down on the board. So let's start things off with the play that we are going to bet this year before we dive into our dark horses. So looking at the markets, looking at the odds available, whether it's WinBet or DraftKings or FanDuel or Consensus, give me your pick for NFL comeback player of the year this year.
Yeah, the one I'm eyeing is at DraftKings right now. It's Jameis Winston plus 550 to win comeback player of the year. I thought Jameis Winston was going to have a shot to win this last year before he tore his ACL, obviously because he sat behind Drew Brees the previous season. And the thing for me is you talk about like the narrative, because I think that is really important in this award too. And we have to realize that people voting on these awards, like it's also journalists. Like you have to consider the narrative part. Like it's human beings voting on these awards. Yeah. The thing for Jameis, they were 5-2 and they upset the Tampa Bay Buccaneers before he tore his ACL last year. This team was on pace to be a playoff team, potentially have a shot to win the division, which is crazy to think about considering the division they're in, playing against Tom Brady and that loaded Bucs team. So for me, I think a lot of people are sleeping on the Saints here coming into the season. Their odds are not great in the futures market. I just think Jameis Winston is a huge upgrade at the quarterback position. Yes, the turnover issues have been there previously in his career, but if you look at his stats last year, he really avoided throwing interceptions, was playing a lot more conservative football, but it was winning football. And I think that also factors into this award. Like Joe Burrow won it last year, Alex Smith won it the year before. You look at both of those teams, the Commanders made the playoffs that year. The Bengals went to the Super Bowl last year. Like you got to win too to win this award. You're not just going to win this, I think, purely off of statistics. That's how you kind of build the narrative in like, oh, Jameis Winston came back and he took the Saints to the playoffs and he had this good year. Like you can kind of build the entire narrative there. I'm trying to see if I can get this at a better price than plus 550 because obviously he's one of the 2 favorites on the board along with Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
But I just think the path there, and I talked about at the beginning of the show how it's not a quarterback award, but it is easier for quarterbacks to kind of have the winning team narrative and all that stuff because they are the driving force. So if this Saints team takes a step this year and Jameis looks as good as he did last year, I don't see why he isn't among the top contenders to win this award.
Jameis is a really good pick because I think the offense is going to take another step in the right direction. It's a year of experience. They're not really changing a whole lot as to what Sean Payton did. Dennis Allen is, the head coach. He was the former defensive coordinator, but Pete Carmichael is still there. Winston had a nice run. Like you said, the 14 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Still had some moments where he forced it a little bit, but it seems like they did a really good job of kind of coaching a lot of those unnecessary throws out of him, but he still took some chances and did it with a wide receiver core that was fairly subpar. This year, that changes drastically. You draft Chris Olave in the first round. Michael Thomas is seemingly healthy. They brought in Jarvis Landry, who's a reliable option in the middle of the field. At tight end, you still have Taysom Hill there, Adam Troutman's there, and a pretty solid offensive line. So all of a sudden, Winston goes from putting up good numbers with very mediocre talent to possibly putting up very good numbers in a bad division with elite level talent. So I think that play makes a ton of sense. I'm actually going to stay in the division and go with a guy that a lot of people are debating as to whether or not he should be their number one overall pick in fantasy this year, and that's Christian McCaffrey. I think, Peter, if you're talking about somebody that you would take number one overall, you have to believe that he's set up for success, even if the team is going to be bad. Like McCaffrey, throughout the course of his career, the Panthers haven't been particularly good, but he's the only player in NFL history to have 50 plus rushing yards per game and 50 plus receiving yards per game over the course of his career. He's it. He's the guy. And you know he's going to be an essential part of their game plan, especially with Baker Mayfield, who did a pretty good job in Cleveland of dumping the ball off to guys like Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. So now all of a sudden that you've upgraded the quarterback position over the last few years relative to what he had in Carolina. And remember, Cam Newton was also stealing a lot of touchdown opportunities during his time in Carolina as well. I think if McCaffrey stays healthy, there's going to be more goal line opportunities. There's going to be more opportunities for receiving touchdowns, more opportunities for rushing touchdowns. Like the consensus opinion around him is that, yes, the team is bad, but he's still going to produce as long as he stays healthy. And yes, it's a big if because of the times and games that he's missed last year. But I think he's set for the course. And I feel like this is an option for him at 8-1 odds. That sets up very, very nicely. I really like Christian McCaffrey to win this award.
I don't mind that play at all. I think obviously there's the re-injury concerns because of the 2 years, but you talk about a guy who is going to be the focal point of an offense. Also, I think that's underrated in this pick is that Matt Rule's trying to save his job this year. Like, I don't think if they go like 4-13, 5-12, he's not coming back. They're going to have to fire him because there'll be 3 straight horrendous years. What's the best way to avoid losing your job? Give the ball to Christian McCaffrey. They started 3-0 last year when he was healthy, and then he got hurt, and the wheels fell off that entire offense.
Right.
So, like, we talk about how running backs aren't as, valuable as certain positions. He's one of the rare ones that I think you can make the argument that he is more valuable. Like, him and Derrick Henry are those guys that's like, yeah, if they don't have him, it's a completely different team. And 100% the Panthers are a completely different team with him because he changes the entire way you defend that team in the run game, in the passing game. Like, he's such a dynamic player. So, I mean, at this point, if you're the Panthers, yes, McCaffrey suffered the injuries, but he's also played about 8 games over 2 seasons. So now you're just kind of like, hey, if we can get a full season out of him, if he touches it 400 times and we win games, who cares at this point? Because we just watched what happens when he doesn't play the last 2 years. So I don't mind that play at all. I think offensively, he might be the most dynamic weapon in the NFL when he's healthy.
Yeah, I think that's a great point about Rule and trying to just rely on whatever weapons you can to save your job. And I want to bring in this note too from Evan Silva over at Establish the Run. He mentions that in last year, McCaffrey, even in the limited sample, led all running backs in yards per route run, targets per route, and had one of the best broken tackle rates in the league. And that was in an extremely limited sample with multiple injuries over the course of the year on a terrible team where everybody knew he was getting the ball. Mm-hmm. If he's healthy, if he plays, those numbers continue to explode, and you almost kind of have to give the award to him purely because of the games that he missed from a season ago. So you're going with Jameis Winston at 5-1. I'm going with Christian McCaffrey at 8-1. Let's go a little bit further down the board. Who is your dark horse pick for NFL Comeback Player of the Year and why?
Yeah, I'm going way down the board for this one. I'm going with Robert Woods, the Tennessee Titans wide receiver.
Bobby Trees.
Bobby Trees at 50-1. There's a lot of guys. I'm not going to act like, this is Robert Woods' award to lose. There's a lot of guys I would bet over him. But the thing I see for Robert Woods, when you get down past like 3-1, 4-1 in the odds, is the volume he's going to have to take on in this Titans offense. Like the Titans, Julio Jones walked. They trade away A.J. Brown. Yes, they drafted Treylon Burks, but he's a rookie wide receiver. Like, we don't really know what we're going to get out of him. They need Robert Woods to be at least the number 2 on this team. And we've seen in previous years, he's an 1,000-yard season type of guy, maybe double-digit touchdowns. I mean, this offense is going to run through Derrick Henry, and obviously he's probably the better candidate, despite the fact on his team for comeback player of the year, despite his odds being insanely high. But I mean, I don't think you're going to find a better value for a guy who's going to have as big a role as Robert Woods is. Like some of the guys I was seeing down here, like Khalil Mack, a defensive player, is 4-1, or 40-1. Like you're getting Robert Woods at 51. He's probably going to see well over 100 targets this year. Probably could push 100 receptions if Ryan Tannehill is a decent quarterback, which he's shown he can be a middle of the pack quarterback. If he plays the A.J. Brown role in this offense, I think the sky's the limit for him. And he was playing well last year before he tore his ACL. He's a veteran receiver. You kind of know what you're going to get out of him. I don't mind him. It's really at this point that far down the list. It's kind of looking at the opportunity. Like there's certain guys on there where you can make the argument for them, but it's like, yeah, is he like Travis Etienne? I think he's down there too. But my worry with him is like, is he going to split time with James Robinson? Like that, how far are you going to go? Like Robert Woods is going to have to get the ball if the Titans want to win games. I don't know if the Titans are going to be good. I'm not exactly high on them, but I think he's a candidate to, have a 1,000-yard season. And at that point, I think it thrusts him up the board from where he is right now.
Yeah, they need plenty of options in Tennessee, especially with no A.J. Brown, no Julio over the course of it. You mentioned Treylon Burks not being a weapon that they feel confident in right now, especially with a slow start in training camp. So Woods eventually is going to be the guy. And like you said, over the last several years, he's shown he can be that 1B to Cooper Kupp before Kupp just took things to a whole new level. But this was somebody that was a very reliable, very consistent receiving option. And as long as he's healthy and able to go, he's going to see plenty of work. And yeah, I think that makes sense, certainly at those odds. I'm going to give you a guy that
you could make the argument prior to like Kupp's breakout year last year that Robert Woods at time was the 1A in that offense and Cooper Kupp was the 1B. So that to me, I'm like, hey, if you're going to tell me that the guy he's got to compete with is Treylon Burks, who's been banged up in training camp and is a rookie, like I think Robert Woods is going to end up being the 1A. And so at that point, you got to think if the Titans want to do anything, he's going to have a big year.
Yeah. And the other thing too, that I think Tennessee is smart enough to steal is I think about all the different counter reverses that they used Robert Woods on. And so now all of a sudden he might be scoring touchdowns as a running back. They're going to move him in the slot. Like he's going to be a really versatile weapon for him. And that's more targets, more opportunities, more volume to really be able to pad those stats and make a name for themselves. If Tennessee is once again back in the playoff race, or possibly even winning that division, which not a lot of people are giving them the opportunity to do, then yeah, I think Woods makes a ton of sense. And I think those are great odds for him. The dark horse for me is out in Jacksonville for a guy that we really didn't get a chance to see at all last year. And I almost feel like that helps him in his road to comeback player of the year. And that's Travis Etienne of Jacksonville at plus 3,000 on the board. There have been comps to how they plan on using him, the Doug Peterson offense, to the way Alvin Kamara has been used over the last several years in New Orleans, the way that DeAndre Swift has been used over the last few years in Detroit. And then everyone says, well, Doug Peterson always used the committee of running backs during his time in Philadelphia. You know what? So did the New Orleans Saints during the Mark Ingram, Alvin Kamara years. It didn't matter. And you're going off of a basis of nothing. So if all of a sudden Etienne is top 5 in the NFL in running backs with receptions this year, and is still getting on the field for, about 40 to 50% of the snaps, he's going to get a ton of work. And I saw this from our guy, Sal Vitri, who does a bunch of really good daily fantasy and fantasy analysis. In week 1 of the preseason, this was a guy that was a 3-down back. He played 20 consecutive snaps, ran a route on 83% of the dropbacks from Trevor Lawrence. And that was even more than what we saw from Kamara last year. So I think they're buying into what Etienne can do. They find him healthy. James Robinson is still coming back from a torn ACL. Even if he projects to be ready by week 1, they're still not going to want to rush him back. I mean, Etienne might have a chance to take that starting job. And again, Peter, I don't know if he necessarily has to be a 3-down back, but he's going to get volume. And Jacksonville is going to go from one of the worst teams in the league to a fairly productive offense with a very good quarterback and a guy in Doug Peterson who actually knows what he's doing, who's won a Super Bowl, who understands how the modern NFL offense works compared to Urban Meyer.
Yeah, I think you're smart for targeting this early because I could see him jumping way up the board because if he wins this job where James Robinson kind of gets eased in because he tore his Achilles last year, like you could be like, oh, wow, Travis Etienne's the one. I am a little nervous about how they're going to kind of delegate that split. But at the same time, I mean, if James Robinson's coming off an Achilles and you have this guy and he's playing well, why are you going to like risk injuring James Robinson again? So that I think makes a ton of sense. And the other thing that is, I feel like we haven't talked about it as much this year as people talked about prior to him getting hurt in camp last year. Like Trevor Lawrence is extremely comfortable with him. They played together in college. So you talk about a guy where I remember the reports last year of it was like Trevor Lawrence, he's loving at ETN on checkdowns. It's like, yeah, his initial reaction would be like, I know where he's going. I'm going to get him the ball. If he's so, to me, I think that is really important too. Is like, who is Trevor Lawrence going to be comfortable with? Because they have like a whole new kind of offense. So like Christian Kirk's in, Zay Jones is in. Like they have a bunch of different guys that he didn't really play with last year. So who is he going to be most comfortable with? We talk about like who's the safety blanket for quarterbacks. A lot of the times it can be a tight end. Sometimes it's a running back. I think that's what he's going to be for Trevor Lawrence. And that could lead to him catching, 65, 75 passes where you're like, okay, not only is he their lead rusher, he's also one of their leading receivers. I definitely could see the path for him there.
All right, so just to recap these comeback player of the year plays for us, and again, for anyone that's joining us, eager to know where we're going to be betting with our game of the night between the New York Mets, Jacob deGrom, and the Atlanta Braves with Max Fried. That's coming up in just a minute. So for our actual best bets, Peter is going with Jameis Winston at plus 550. I'm going with Christian McCaffrey at 8-1. And then for some dark horse plays a little bit further down the board, Pete's going with Robert Woods, Bobby Trees over with Tennessee in his first year there at 5-1. I'm going with Jaguars running back Travis Etienne at 30-1. Some fun names on that board. And again, we haven't even talked about guys like Saquon Barkley on the mix. Baker Mayfield could possibly be in play as well. There's so many really intriguing names on the board that, I bet if you ask 10 different people, you might get 10 different answers for this type of award. But I think all four of ours, there's definitely some value there because of what their roles can be. So excited to see how that market eventually turns out for NFL Comeback Player of the Year. Speaking of comebacks, Jacob deGrom has looked very, very good since returning to the New York Mets. He is on the road for them tonight to wrap up their series against the Atlanta Braves. One of those matchups too, Peter, where you're trying to figure out like, okay, is this going to be the series that Atlanta finally starts to dive in? You think that's the case, and then the Mets come out and look good on Wednesday night. So the latest odds for this game have, last time I checked, were the Mets off the board. I think actually it keeps changing on me, Peter. Do you happen to have the latest odds in front of you for this game? Because I had it on the board over at DraftKings, and now it is no longer on the board, at least from my count. Do you happen to have the latest odds for tonight?
Give me
Oh, I got it right here. Okay.
So we got Mets minus 130, Braves plus 110 on the money line.
Okay, so that's actually shifted a little bit in favor of the Mets tonight. So deGrom and the Mets minus 130, plus 110 with a total of 7. So when it comes to this matchup, you and I are actually not necessarily going on either team on the money line or the run line or the total. We both have props for this game. So go ahead and kick things off. Tell me your play for the game of the night.
Yeah, this is by far the pitching matchup of the night. So if you like pitching duels, this is where you got to go. Jacob deGrom against Max Fried. deGrom has been absolutely nuts. He struck out 15.1 batters per 9 innings through his first 3 starts, which is just insanity. And I'm taking the no runs first inning here at minus 145. Yeah, you got to lay a little bit of juice with it, but you look at these 2 starters this season. deGrom has only allowed 3 runs. Fried has a 2.6 ERA. Over his last 9 starts, his FIP is under 2. It's 1.99. And the other thing about Max Fried, in 22 starts this year, he's allowed just 3 runs in the first inning. He has a 1.23 ERA, and opponents are hitting just 152 against him. So there's a good chance he goes 1-2-3 in this first inning with the way opponents have been hitting against him. Hopefully I don't jinx it by saying that, but I think him and deGrom here, I also don't mind. I wrote up in my parlay picks today. I don't mind the first 5 innings under, at under 3 at plus money. I saw that over at WinBet. Yeah. I just think if you're going to back anything in this game, it's these 2 starters. We watched the Mets score 1 run over the first 18 innings of the series. Then they exploded last night against Jake Odorizzi. But this is a completely different animal in terms of Fried and DeGrom on the mound. So I'm not going to worry about the bullpens. I'm not going to even worry about the first 5. I'm just going to take no runs first inning. I think both these guys get out to a strong start.
Yeah, that's been their MO both for the season as well as against each other. And part of the reason that my favorite prop of the night is actually on Max Fried. I like his over 4.5 strikeouts, also at the same odds at -145. Fried, if you look at his numbers consistently over the course of the year, he's not like a strikeout type of pitcher. He's someone that goes deep into games. He can move the fastball around. He's got a great curveball. But this is somebody that has only gone under 4.5 strikeouts a total of 6 times in 22 starts. And going through his whole game log over the course of this year, there has not been a time where he has finished under 4 strikeouts at any time. So, bare minimum, Pete, he's going to be right at that number throughout the course of the game. Like, it's going to be at least 4. Now, the Mets, very good lineup, very patient lineup. However, Fried at home sees his strikeouts per 9 inning go up nearly a full strikeout more than on the road. And in his last 6 starts against the Mets, so this isn't just like over history, this is like pretty much against a very similar lineup. He has gone more than 4.5 strikeouts in all 6 of those games. And he's averaging, you talked about his number is 8.5 strikeouts per 9 at home. He averages more than 10 strikeouts per 9 against the Mets. So the last 6 games, he's hit that over. The numbers against the Mets, he's hit the over. And yeah, it's -145, but the number just feels far too low for somebody that has had complete control against this Mets team over the course of the last few years. So I love Fried again tonight. And yeah, DeGrom's going to be dominant. Fried's going to be dominant. So I might consider maybe a small play on putting those two together. So that -145 and -145 turns into a plus odds parlay. So something to consider on the board for tonight as well.
Yeah, I think if you're going to back anything in this game, you got to just trust the starting pitching. So
yeah.
I like that a lot, especially with a total at 7, like 4.5 strikeouts. If you like kind of are taking what the odds makers are giving us, like this means Fried's pitching 5-6, like into the 6th inning. So if you're going to give him 18, 19, maybe 20 outs in this game, you think he can get 5 strikeouts? I think that's very, very reasonable. And you're not laying an insane number on it, which I would think you normally would be, considering what you said. He's never gone under 4.
Yep.
So normally to have over 4.5, you're probably laying like 180, 190. To only have 145, I think that's really good value.
I'm not very good at math, but I can tell you that if you average 10 strikeouts per 9 innings and you're going, almost a minimum of 6 innings per game, you're going to get to the number that you want to get to with plenty of room to spare. So yeah, love the plays for tonight between both the no-run first inning as well as Max Fried over 4.5 strikeouts. As far as all of you who have joined us over the course of today, who have voted on our Twitter poll as well as our YouTube poll, you're back in the New York Mets. I get it. Big win against Atlanta last night. It's DeGrom against Max Fried. I think if anyone was going to take one over the other, I get the decision to back DeGrom. The numbers have moved slightly towards him as the numbers have moved on, but we'll take it at -125. So that is the community bet for the game of the night. Mets -125. And of course, Peter and I going with different props on the board, but we will back your play as well. Quick reminder, no Daily Bet Slip on Friday this week. We will be back on Monday with a brand new episode and back again at 5 p.m. East Coast time. Should be another really fun show. We'll have a full second week of NFL preseason to be able to learn from. Plenty more baseball as the postseason races start to get heated up a little bit more. WNBA playoffs will be officially underway as well. So looking forward to being back on Monday. Peter, it'll be a good time. Appreciate you being on with us. Also, big shout out to Joanne, our producer and director. So for Peter, I'm Ben. May all of your best bets hit tonight. We will see you back here again on Monday on the Daily Bet Slip at 5 p.m. Eastern. So long, everybody.